CarLifestyle Podcast
with host
Seth Rose from Exotics Rally,
Tminus, Gabe Florido
from CarLifestyle.
Welcome back to podcast number 18. I'm here today with my co-host Tminus, and today we have a very, very special guest who actually has come a long ways to be here for an event and some other business dealings, and has taken the time out of his busy schedule to record a podcast with us. So without further ado, we'd like to welcome to the podcast the CEO and founder of Spyker Cars and Automobile from Holland, Mr. Victor Muller.
Hi, Seth.
Welcome to the podcast, Victor.
Thank you so much.
Glad to have you here, and
Nobody welcomed me, so I'm just going to jump up in this bitch.
welcome Tminus.
Oh, thank you so much, Seth.
I said my co-host.
Yeah.
He did.
Thanks.
He did say that.
He's like my attorney and my advocate at the same time.
Right, but
Fantastic.
you were mentioned.
I always defend you.
Apparently, you guys have a little coalition going
Well,
here.
and he needs, by the sound of it, he needs defense.
Woo!
Yes, he certainly does.
Victor Muller is in the building.
Yes, so in case anybody in case yes, we are in Manhattan in the hood, and I'd like to thank Reich for hosting us today and this past weekend. So what brought Victor initially out this way was the 15-year anniversary of Spyker Cars, which I was a part of since I am a Spyker owner. And we all met up at Reich's house. Reich is an avid enthusiast for Spyker. You've owned how many, Reich?
Two.
And we met up at his house up in the mountains at the Catskills. We had a gathering where there were people present from all over, including from overseas. And it was a great time this past weekend. But why don't we start with a little history of Spyker, since a lot of people aren't familiar with the brand, hence the reason why my license plate says, "What is that?" And it's become synonymous with Spyker around our area. I became fond of Spyker back, I would say it was probably about, I'm going to say 5 or 6 years ago, when we initially met at the Monticello racetrack.
Exactly.
When I scared a couple of people because I am a member there and familiar with the track, and people were a little unsettled with my driving.
And it was very wet.
Yeah, it was.
Tell him what else you do in the wet.
Oh, why don't you tell us what I did in the wet?
Because you scared the shit out of me. I was good. I was like, listen, Seth,
one
you're going to have
point
to pull over and get me out because I am done.
At one point, and I don't know if it still holds true, but I was the record holder for a street legal vehicle on Pocono Raceway. What was it, 100?
Fastest lap in the wet. You did 186 miles an hour.
Yeah.
In the pouring rain. He's lost.
It's not the smartest thing in the world, but hey, I'm here to talk about it.
It's like the Jewish Evil Knievel.
So why don't we start off with a little history of Spyker Cars. I believe Spyker was founded in what year?
1880 as a coach building company, very high-end coach building company by two brothers, Jacobus and Henricus Spyker, which actually in Dutch you spell like S-P-I-J-K-E-R.
Oh, okay.
But they started making coaches, and then by 1898 they made their very first car, which in those days was nothing but a let's say a fast coach with an engine, with a one-cylinder.
A tin bucket
engine.
with a one-cylinder engine.
Nothing but that. And there were, just to put things in perspective, right? I mean, we think that today car industry is a lot of consolidation going on, but to put things in perspective, in the year 1900, there were just in Europe 4,000 car manufacturers.
Wow.
Every blacksmith, every coach builder that could fit a one-cylinder Mercedes or the Dion Bouton engine to a chassis was a coach builder, was a car maker. And of course, we've seen how few of those have survived over the years. But Spyker was definitely one of them, and they were quite innovative. In 1903, they were the first company ever to make a six-cylinder car. They were the first to introduce four-wheel drive to a car. They were the first. Absolutely. They were the first to make
That's sick.
four-wheel brakes to any car. All in one car, actually, in the 1903 60 horsepower Grand Prix racer. And so they were quite an innovative company. And by 1914, they merged with the Dutch aircraft manufacturing company and became an aircraft manufacturer and a car maker. And they made about 100 fighter planes and 200 engines, aircraft engines. And this was all during the Great War in Europe, in which actually the Netherlands were neutral. But they still made the planes. And of course, in good Dutch trading vein, we sold them to everybody who wanted them. particularly to those who were fighting each other, because that was good for sales. In 1918, the war ceased, and so did the production of the planes, and Spyker resumed car production.
So they phased out of the aircraft and went back to strictly automobile.
The aircraft heritage remained, and they started building cars like aircraft. All the technologies they developed over the years to build the aircraft, they basically transported to the car building, and that's what they did until 1925, when they went into what they called voluntary liquidation. The company just ceased to trade.
So 1925 is when it ceased operations under the original
ownership.
Okay.
So it was like 45 years of trading in the form of coaches, cars, and planes.
Okay.
But they also made some boats.
They did?
Yeah.
Interesting. And now, what was your drive to relaunch the Spyker name?
Well, I was in the 90s buying new Astons, new Ferraris, and I thought they were really crappily made.
Okay.
And I was very much into collecting classic cars. I had a huge collection, 50 of them, race Ferraris, Maseratis, Aston Martins, but also a lot of pre-war cars, really high-end pre-war cars, Rolls Royces, Isotta Fraschinis, Invictas, Hispano Suizas, the really nice handcrafted stuff. And I thought, how come that, and then we're talking 1997, how come you can't buy nowadays a car which has phenomenal performance, but is handcrafted in the same way as the pre-war cars were? So I decided to do it myself. And fortunately, I could.
So what enabled you to be able to do this? What did you do before Spyker Cars?
I'm a lawyer originally by profession.
Okay.
And I worked as an international merchant acquisitions lawyer with Baker McKenzie in Amsterdam. But I was working primarily in the United States. And then I became chief negotiator, if you will, director of corporate affairs for a very large offshore conglomerate that I'd worked for a long time. And we made a lot of acquisitions. And 3 years into that, I bought one of the subsidiaries out, which was a salvage and towage company, towage operator, tugboat operator.
Right.
And that was in 1991. And I started buying companies that were basically ailing, $1 companies. And I bought a lot of them, and I turned them around. I took them public. I kept them, or sometimes I sold them off. In any event, I made enough money to pursue my boyhood dream of becoming a car maker.
So you were buying a lot of these classics. You had quite a collection. With your collection, would you say that you were storing them to show them, just to collect them, heritage, or did you drive them?
All of the above. I participated. My dream was to win Pebble Beach, Concours d'Elegance, right? Every collector has that dream.
Sure.
And I won quite some prizes at Pebble Beach with my classics, but of course I never came close to winning. So that's still on my bucket list. But the car collecting world has been a tremendous inspiration for Spyker, right? Only genuine materials, no plastics, real leathers, real aluminium panels, everything the crafted in the right way. And that comes at a price, but our customers are more than happy to pay that price because they get a unique piece of what they call automotive art. And it's such a joy to build cars for a very educated audience. I mean, you were there this weekend. Seth Reich hosted an amazing event exactly to the date, 15 years after I unveiled the very first...
Really?
To the date. 15 years after I unveiled 001 at the British Motor Show in Birmingham.
Was that hatchback looking one?
It was a Spider, a C8 Spider, and it's in my office still today, and it is really very, very much the same as the production cars. Very little has changed. Mm-hmm. And so 15 years later, after many ups and downs, I'm glad to say we're still around and we're still making beautiful products.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to that, but Spyker has been through the trials and tribulations over the years.
All self-inflicted, I have to say.
Wait, what year did you start Spyker Cars? Or did you take over or did you acquire the company?
Well, there was no company. I founded the company. It was a greenfield operation.
What year was that?
2000.
So the name was available and there was no licensing issues?
Funnily enough, the name was not registered by anyone. Because when the company went out of business in 1925, there were no trademark laws. There were no trade name laws. So nobody registered the name. And I did.
I presume you did, yeah.
Guess what? As a lawyer, I did. But not only that, I went back to the family, to the Spyker family, who were very easy to trace. And I said, listen, this is what I want to do. I want to bring back the Spyker company absolutely in the same vein as the cars that were built by your forefathers. But I'll only do it if you give me your blessing. And they loved it. They come to every event, and they are absolutely enthralled with the idea of the Spyker company having basically been resurrected.
And let me ask you, did you do it because of Dutch pride? Like, did you stay in, you know?
No, I don't think it's Dutch pride. It is just a practical thing. There was only one car maker that meant anything in international automotive history from Holland, and that was Spyker.
There's not many manufacturers around in Holland, correct?
Well, you would have a choice of three, basically. Spyker, there was a very small company called Isink, who made very few cars. And then there was DAF, the very small cars that were made in the 60s and 70s, 50s actually.
Right, but why not your own idea? Why not Muller Cars?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I played with that idea for about 0.1 second. The reason why I chose Spyker is because Spyker had an amazing heritage and history. And being a buyer of new Ferraris and new Astons, I knew, and collecting the cars, I knew how important it is to have a heritage and a story. So it would have been very easy to call the car a Muller GT, right? Sure. But I just thought I'm too old to see that come to a fruition. And I chose the shortcut to basically tap into the history of at the time, very famous brand. In the 1920s, Spykers were known as the Rolls-Royce of the continent. They were really making exceptionally beautiful handcrafted cars. And so by picking up on that heritage, I think we've made our lives very difficult in many other ways, but definitely not by going for the Spyker brand. That was a very good move. And also, in 1903, when Spyker really started exporting cars abroad, they changed the name from SPIJKER to SPYKER so that foreigners could pronounce the name, right? Any Brit would say Spyker, right? Yeah. And the French couldn't pronounce the name at all. So it became Spyker, Spyker in French, and that worked very well. So I took up that brand name and I embraced it, and we used the company's heritage very much to our advantage because, and maybe more important than anything else, it also gave me design language. By basically going down the path of history of Spyker, you have to stop at the aircraft manufacturing part, where aviation became the overriding activity within the company. And after that, they started making cars like planes. So what I did is I just, I connected all the dots between 1925 and 2000 when I started, and I said to myself, let's assume they had continued producing cars. What would their cars now look like? And they would have still kept that design element of basically making cars like aircraft.
Yeah.
And so
there's so many design now. The design now and the future design is all based upon aircraft heritage.
And it's easy to have a design language which is embedded in the history of your company because it's easy to explain. And people love it, right? We owned Saab, as you know, for a while. Their heritage was aircraft manufacturing. They started as an aircraft manufacturer in 1937.
Saab.
BMW too, no?
BMW made aircraft engines.
Oh, I see.
The logo of BMW is a
propeller in the sky.
Propeller.
Yeah.
But in fact, they never made planes. They made aircraft engines. There are very few companies.
Rolls-Royce as well. Rolls-Royce made engines, but never
made planes.
Right.
Isotta Fraschini made beautiful engines, never planes. Ford made a few planes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, but the other brand from the continent that really did both was Voisin. French brand, extremely high-end. They made cars and planes. And of course, Saab. And Saab, to this day, makes the Gripen jet in Sweden. An F-16 competitor.
Wow.
So they are still an aircraft manufacturer, but they're no longer the same company. Saab was carved up in three different groups, so to speak: the cars, the planes, and the trucks. But there were very few car makers that were also plane makers.
It was really interesting.
So Spyker was launched in 2000. That's when the first model was actually launched at a show, which would, I'm assuming, be the Geneva show?
No, that would have been logical, but we didn't have time for that.
Okay.
So we launched at the Birmingham Motor Show.
Okay. And upon launch, I'm sure it took the world by storm. There was a lot of interested people. How many vehicles did you actually sell upon launch?
We sold 15 vehicles from that show.
Wow.
That was way in excess of anything we ever believed possible. But the craftsmanship was already, we really sold the car on its design and its craftsmanship, and the fact that it was going to be a unique vehicle. But, it's always, between, let's say, Lamborghini entering the market in 1963 and today, there must have been 400, 500, 600 companies that tried to enter the top segment of the motor car industry. And invariably, they all failed. Look at those who are here today.
Or they had a lot of models that were flops.
Yeah.
True. You only entered in with one model.
But then we made another model and another model, and then we went racing at Le Mans. So we did, race on Sunday, sell on Monday. It's actually an axiom that comes from this continent. It was Stutz that used race on Sunday, sell on Monday in the 1920s. And it still holds true today. Absolutely. Look at Ferrari. You couldn't think of a better example. Tremendous.
Yeah.
Monster, yeah. So, to date, how many vehicles has Spyker sold?
We have produced today 267 cars.
And that's a combination of the Spyker C8, the C8...
Of all the models, including the prototypes,
the
test cars, everything. We just give every car a sequence of chassis numbers, 001 to 267. It's all the cars. So we don't make a distinction, different chassis numbers for different cars. So you know exactly when you have 223 or 216 or 213, you know this is the 213th car built. It's not novel. I stole that from Ferrari.
Did you?
That's what Enzo did. Yeah. He just
Thanks,
numbered. he numbered all of his
Enzo.
cars, but he had even numbers for the race cars and uneven numbers for the road cars. So, but we just basically took that everything is in a sequence. Every chassis number is in a sequence.
Now, what would you say to somebody, because I've heard some people say, oh, well, it's kind of like a kit car because it has, it's got an Audi drivetrain and, the rear tail lamps are reminiscent of a Diablo and so on and so forth. What do you say to people like that say it's kit car?
Bullshit.
Okay. That's what I like to hear.
Victor Muller rolling the flesh.
Do you think a Bentley Continental is a kit car?
No,
because it has a Volkswagen W12 engine?
No, of course not. But
No.
Volkswagen and Bentley, there's a marriage in the company.
Right.
So a lot of people have stated to me in the past that, Spyker, that they feel is a kit car because it has, it's an Audi drivetrain. So they just took a chassis from one country, they took a body from another country, and they just matched it all together. And
Yes.
kind of
Well, if
plugged
that
it in.
was the case, I would have to agree with you.
Right.
But we designed and completely developed our own chassis. We designed and completely developed our own body. And basically, engines are quite generic nowadays, right? Mm-hmm. So we took the best engine we could find at the time, the Audi 4.2 liter.
Now, you've been using that since 2000?
Yeah, and I don't think that anybody would call a Pagani a kit car because it uses an AMG
Mercedes-Benz.
6.3 engine, does it? Do you?
No, definitely not.
No.
No
And
way.
nobody calls a Koenigsegg a kit car because it started off with a Ford V8 5.0 liter
I didn't
engine.
know that.
And they did. And they totally made their own engine out of that. And that's one of their incredible feats. Koenigsegg is an amazing company, as is Pagani. But nobody ever told me that Pagani is a kit car because they use an AMG engine.
Right. Did you ever have any interest in creating your own engine?
Oh, definitely. But it is prohibitively expensive. It's not just creating the engine. It's the worldwide certification that is just unaffordable at the production numbers that we have. It's unaffordable for anyone, right? It's only the Ferraris of this world that can afford to have their own engines. But even, has anybody said that a Lamborghini is a kit car because they use Audi's V10?
No.
I don't think so.
No.
But it's an Audi V10.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely. I've owned
absolutely.
4 of them, and there's so many Volkswagen, Audi parts.
He has one in the car that he drove here today.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. 25 years ago, if you would have said a Bentley will one day have a Volkswagen engine, everybody would have fallen back laughing, right? But those days are gone.
Absolutely.
Certification has become such a big issue that you just have to take this in your stride. You can't afford, as a small manufacturer, to develop your own engine other than, for instance, what McLaren has done by taking a Ricardo engine and developed that into their own engine. But it's costed them so much money.
I'm sure. I mean, even the McLaren F1 had a BMW engine.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And then the new FT1 is supposed to have some kind of part.
And that's one of the most coveted supercars in the world.
Well, they're the most expensive. Now, they're officially the most expensive recent supercars ever made.
The F1 is.
The F1 is there now, $15 million.
At least, yeah.
$15 million for an F1.
1.5.
1.5.
Yeah, I knew that. I thought you were saying 5.0, and I was like, what?
No, that's 250 GTO territory.
Yeah, those are about 60 million.
Yeah. So no, but that's nobody has ever complained, I think, about the fact that the F1 had a BMW engine.
My question is, why no power? Why no turbo? Why no supercharger?
Well, I mean, I personally owning one, I think it's too light to really harness that much power.
What's the way?
I could not agree more. We have built a few with superchargers. That is the short wheelbase C8 Spyders and Laviolettes. And it doesn't become a better car because of it. It's just too much power for the power to weight ratio is already very good.
What's the way?
It's like 1,200 kilos, so it's like 2,600 pounds. So that's pretty damn light. And if you add more horsepower than 400 to it, it really becomes a tricky car. You don't want
it becomes very impractical.
Well, it's unmanageable, I would say.
Yeah, it's just too much. Yeah. But in the Aileron, which is the successor to the C8 Spyder and Laviolette, we put a lot of compressors because it's a longer wheelbase car. It's wider.
Yeah, so it's definitely a larger car. I think you toyed around with a Chevy engine in that at one point. A GM
Not
engine.
with Chevy. We had an opportunity at the time to use the GM LSA engine, which was in the Cadillac CTS.
Okay.
CTS V actually, and that was an interesting 6.2 liter, normally aspirated. Extremely strong. Very old-fashioned engine in a way with a central camshaft, but they did the trick. We built one, and then strangely enough we fell out with General Motors over a completely different subject.
Right.
And we decided not to build a car with a GM powered engine.
So the cars remained pretty identical over the years. There's not much changes from year to year, would you say?
Well,
as far as the first model, the C8.
The C8 remained in production between 2000 and 2012, basically, which is, of course, is a very long time to make the same product. But we managed to sell them, keep on selling. We could still sell them today. We still have people that want to buy a C8 Spyder today. Well, we can't. We just don't have enough parts to do that. So we don't. But it remained.
That was the only model that was available stateside.
It was the only model that was available stateside, but in 2009 we introduced the Aileron, which went into production in 2010. And this coincided with us acquiring Saab, and of course that was a massive drain on our financial situation. Sure. I mean, like horrifying. And that really caused a tremendous slowdown of the production. We only made 17 ailerons so far.
And that was not available stateside?
Nope. It wasn't.
And that's due to federal regulations?
Yeah, federal regulations. Not crash testing, but the engine, the Audi engine.
You know what's interesting? I don't even know. What is the law about bringing it into the States? Do you have to crash test cars, or is it a certain number of cars?
Is it the windshield certification?
It's everything. It's all of the above. I mean, there is really no reason why we would have to do anything less than another manufacturer. So when we managed to get ourselves certified in 2005, it was the biggest effort we'd ever overcome. It was sensationally difficult, but we did it. The regulations are not made to get you in. They're basically made to keep you out.
Right.
Which means that as a small manufacturer, you do have to do all the crash testing, you have to pass all the emission tests, which at the time was Lev 1, now we're at Lev 2. And so our cars needed to pass Lev 2 emission tests. But an emission test is not just what comes out of your exhaust.
Right.
It's the evaporation of your paint and your tires and the glue in your interior, and there's hot soak tests, and you have no idea. Oh man, it's a humongous task.
And does this exist anywhere else in the world?
Yes, it does exist elsewhere in the world, but the regulations in America are very stringent. So basically, if you pass American regulations, you probably pass everywhere else. Right. So for a small car manufacturer to be able to overcome those hurdles and get certified for the United States, that was really something. The engine, however, that we used, the Audi V8, the certification ran out in 2010 for us. So we either had to completely recertify the engine on our own, which would have been possible, costly but possible, or wait until we could get another engine with the certification and piggyback on the Audi certification. But of course, then everything fell apart, and we went into such a bad time that the last thing we worried about was US certification.
Right. Okay, it's interesting. So
Really crazy.
yeah,
And if only America could really give that much of a shit about its driver's licenses, we would have actually good drivers.
It's actually
in
easy
America.
to get a driver's license in the U.S. in comparison to a lot of other
Yeah,
countries.
maybe easier even than to get a gun, right? That would
pretty
be
easy
areas,
to get a
yeah.
gun
some
here,
areas.
so-
Anyway, we'll need no worry about that. But surely, getting the cars into states, about 100 Spykers in America. That is, we thought that was quite a feat.
When I heard the number the other day, Chris, who was the North American rep for you for a while, who's very knowledgeable, had told me that at one point there were 127 that were sold in North America, and then some have subsequently left.
Yeah,
North
I mean,
America.
when the dollar was very favorably, the exchange rate was very favorable, Europeans started picking the Spykers off here and taking them back to Europe. So I think currently we're down to about 100 pieces. But out of all the cars we produced, in fact, nothing's changed, right? When Jaguar introduced the E-Type in 1961, 50% of them would go to America, out of which 50% would go to California. 50 years fast forward, it's still exactly the same for
Wow.
us. Exactly the same.
What was the first time that you heard of Spyker, Seth?
I mean, I had seen Spyker at the auto show, probably
year was that?
in 2007,
Oh, really?
2008. Manhattan Motor Cars was a dealer at the
Exactly,
time.
my first dealer in America.
Yeah, that was the
Wonderful
first
guys.
Yo, Brian
Wonderful
Miller
guys.
was popping.
I can tell you, Brian Miller has been the single most, the best ambassador you could ever have on a dealer level.
He's a nice guy.
Wonderful guy, and he drives a Spyker in his summer house. He drives a Spyker around all day, every day. That's a
then,
big compliment, right, to a guy who could drive anything.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely anything. And then 2 years later is when we met at Monticello, when I got to toss the car around on a track, and immediately I fell in love with the car, and then I was trying to negotiate
remember you telling me that.
buying the orange Laviolette that was at the track at that day.
Yeah.
Which was housed at Manhattan Motor Cars. So
You were actually really impressed by the way it drove. And you were coming from a Superleggera, which was Lamborghini's track
well,
car.
I went through a phase where I was going to all paddle shift, E-Gear and F1, and I had the GTR, and I had the Mitsubishi Evo MR, and I had the Superleggera, the 430. So I was, paddle shifting everything. And then it kind of brought me back to my roots of when I first started driving, just to drive a manual gearbox. Because let's face it, today's cars don't have manual gearboxes, and Spyker has always.
We've always had gearboxes with manual shift,
Right.
but on the aileron.
The aileron, yeah.
Well, the aileron is a much longer car, and it had to be because the automatic gearbox is a much longer gearbox than the manual. But also for all sorts of other reasons, we wanted to make a bigger car. Also aerodynamically, it's much better to have a longer car. But if we look at the sales of aileron, basically where they went, everybody wanted an automatic, except for Europe. And I drive a manual aileron, and I think it's unbeatable. I mean, I really love to be engaged myself in the process, so I can do what I want. not what-
Absolutely. So you don't have a computer rethinking
Well,
your...
I mean, an AMT or whatever automatic system you can apply to shifting for you, it's probably capable of doing it better than you.
Absolutely.
But is it more fun? I don't think so.
No, definitely
And
not.
neither do my clients. My clients love the fact that it's you in charge, you enjoying the drive, rather than some robot that does it for you.
Well, not only that, but Spyker also doesn't have many creature comforts. It doesn't have traction control.
But yes, we do have traction on the ailerons. We do.
On the
It's the
ailerons.
law.
Right.
Yeah.
On the C8, like what I have,
No.
there's no traction control.
No.
Many of them didn't even have power brakes. I think mine is. but some of them did
Many
not.
don't have power brakes, and so which means that you have a complete linear brake line, right? There is no progression. It's completely linear, like in race cars. And not everybody likes that, but it's a car that is made
It's a
for
driver's
drivers.
car. It's a
Exactly,
driver's
it's an
car.
engaging car.
Absolutely.
And you cannot drive this car around without thinking what you're doing. You're
Mm.
driving it, you're engaged with it. Even the starting process, as you know, right? Flipping up
Sure.
the aircraft switch, and then the whole process you need
That's
to go
all
through.
your attention to detail.
But it's done for a reason. The reason is I want the driver to focus on his car. He is going to go for a drive. So there's nothing else he can do. He's just focusing on the process to get the baby going, and then he goes. And you can ask any owner, the whole process of getting into the car, engaging with it, and driving it is something that is very special to Spyker, and people love it. They love the car for it, like they love the exposed gear linkage, which is, in fact, if you come to think of it, it's nothing special.
No, it's just exposed.
It's just exposed.
And that's
Everybody
what I
could do
explained-
it,
right, that's
but
what I
nobody
explained to
does.
But the
everybody.
world is so complacent
Mesmerized
now.
by it.
Yeah, by
People want
everything's
to
like
hide
they
the
want to
beautiful.
open they want to open the hood and just see a smiley face. They don't want to change their own oil. They don't want to do anything.
No.
Everything is like watered down now.
Manufacturers don't want you to get close to their technology, right? And we are proud of the technology. We want to show technology because technology is beautiful. And the exposed gear linkage is just an exponent of that. Enjoy
It's
it.
probably the single most talked about item on a Spyker.
Yeah, well, which is actually sad if you come to think of it.
I mean, that's why I've always wanted an older Lamborghini because of the gated shift.
Which,
Or
how
an
beautiful
older
is
Ferrari.
that? How beautiful is that? That's a piece of
Like
art.
I just need that in my life.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
even need to drive the car. I just need to see it.
Well, unfortunately, that is true for many Spyker owners because they don't drive their cars too much because they have so many cars.
Right.
But they.
Becomes a-
I mean,
it's a
you
piece
saw
of
the
artwork.
German owner who has just ordered his third car.
yeah.
Right. The first two cars he doesn't drive. He puts them as art in his private museum. And there are many customers like that. We have customers that have rebuilt their houses with a glass wall
That's
behind
so
which
sick.
yeah, they put their car as a piece of art in their house. I think it's a tremendous testimony
It's a tremendous compliment.
to the company and to the design of the car.
But
that
you
people
also
think that way.
enjoy people who drive them.
But I much rather have them drive him like Rijks put 50,000 miles on both of his cars, right? He drives the shit out of them, and that's good. That's really what you want. And you get feedback from your customers. People that drive 10 miles a year will never tell you what's wrong or not.
They'll never truly engage and appreciate what the car was built for.
But they buy it for a different reason. They buy it because they think it's beautiful. Well, paintings are beautiful. You don't drive a painting. You just look at it and enjoy it the way it is. I can appreciate that, but I prefer people to drive my car. It's meant to be driven.
The reason I asked you about Dayton, I asked Seth about what year he was put onto Spyker is because I'm not positive, but I feel like 04, 05, Carl Lewis was in a Spyker.
He
in
was.
Gumball.
He was. Well, it wasn't Gumball.
It was Bull Run.
Was it?
It
Oh,
was
it was
Bull
Bull
Run.
Run? Oh.
Bull Run.
We did Bull Run with two cars. New York,
Paris Hilton,
New York to.
Carl Lewis.
And I remember
Beverly
being like,
Hills.
what? Like, I like to think that I know a little bit about cars and that I know what's new and what's good and this and that. And I had never seen it before.
Yeah.
And I was like, that thing is
2007.
sick.
And then
Yeah.
it became my first car,
Really?
Yeah.
the 107.
Oh, really?
107 became Rijks' first car.
Carl Lewis, where you at?
He had. I tell you, Carl Lewis had a lot of fun in that car.
Did he?
Yeah.
Can he drive?
He actually raced a Spyker on the drag strip.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
He did. He did very well.
Yeah.
He wasn't just fast on foot.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was interesting about them. That you were involved in Bull Run at the time. Now,
Yeah, that's cool.
You had mentioned the race team. What years was that?
Well, we introduced. I always felt very strongly that we needed to go racing like the old Spykers had done. Spyker participated. Well, first of all, the 1903 car was a 60 horsepower Grand Prix racer. That car
was a six-cylinder, right?
Six-cylinder. That car was
was unheard
capable
of
of
then.
60 miles an hour. Now, bear in mind, 1903, Kitty
It's
Hawk.
like unheard of.
Unheard of.
Yeah.
Kitty Hawk, Wright brothers, a plane, 30 miles an hour, right? A train in those days, maybe 40 miles an hour. The fastest car on the globe was the Mercedes Grand Prix car and the Spyker Grand Prix car because they could do 60 miles an hour.
Sick.
It was, when people ask me what's the fastest you've ever driven, I will say, 60 miles an hour in a Miller, which was a 1905 London to Brighton car, right? Where you're completely exposed with a tiller steering wheel. 60 miles in that car is faster than a Bugatti Veyron at the straight, right?
That's crazy.
It is such a different experience. So that car, 1903, was a race car that did extremely well. Then in 1907, the French newspaper Le Matin decided, that it was high time, that the car had been around for 10 years, and they decided that they wanted to organize a race from a city that everybody knew but no car had ever been, back to what they perceived to be the center of the world, Paris. So they organized the Peking to Paris Raid, 1907. And 5 cars entered, a Itala from Italy, Spyker, 2 Dion Boutons, and 1 Cotal. And the Cotal was like a 3-wheeler, halfway a motorbike and a car. And the French guy who ran the Spyker in the race, Godard, managed to get what we think is the first case of sports sponsoring in history, because he got Louis Vuitton to sponsor his car. So on the side of the car, you see a big trunk, and it says Louis Vuitton, trunks and bags. And with that, he drove Peking to Paris. And so when I started the company up, I went to Louis Vuitton and I said, listen, have you seen this? Oh yeah, they knew about that. And I said, well, I would very much like to have a specific Louis Vuitton kit for my cars, because my customers would die to have that.
Absolutely.
And they made them. So you could refer your client to Louis Vuitton, and they would buy a Spyker luggage set consisting of 5 pieces.
That's so dope.
Tailored to the trunk of a Spyker C8. And that's just because of this 1907 relationship that Spyker had with Louis Vuitton.
That's so dope. All right, I'm going to buy Spyker. All right.
It took, bloody hell, it took half an hour to get you this far. That's unusually long, Mr. Minus.
I'm into it, man. I'm into it.
Good.
That's
No, but that's. I mean, we talked before. Why go for Spyker? Because of the heritage. There's this incredible aviation heritage, this incredible racing heritage. So coming back to your question, Seth, why did you go back in racing? Well, we went to the Frankfurt Motor Show on 11 September 2001. We unveiled the Double 12 race car at the Frankfurt Motor Show. And Double 12 stands for a record that Spyker won in 1919. There, in those days, a 24-hour record was just put a car on a track, race it for 12 hours, stop, have tea on Sunday, and then continue the remaining 12 hours on Monday. That's the way they did it. And in 1919, Spyker broke the 24-hour record with a Spyker C4, big time. And they did like 1,900 kilometers, like 1,200 miles, something like that, in 24 hours, non-stop. That was the Double 12 record, 2 times 12.
That's really cool.
So we introduced the Double 12R for racing, and we had our first race at Sebring in 2002. And then Le Mans 2002, 2003, and we kept on going back to Le Mans until 2010. So we did it 8 times in total, and our best performance at Le Mans was in 2009 when we finished 5th in class behind 4 Ferrari 430s.
Wow.
And we beat every single Porsche at their own game. This minute company from Holland making their own engines, because the race engines we did build ourselves, we beat every single Porsche.
Wow.
We were proud as a peacock, as we say in Holland. And
Porsche, where you at, Porsche?
well, they're still there, and we're not racing anymore. So they won in the end. Trust me.
It's still a remarkable feat.
It's a remarkable feat, but also we learned so much about our own product racing it at Le Mans. People think, how difficult can it be? 24 hours. If I drive from here all the way west,
They don't
drive
get it.
24 hours, and my car still works. Why would that be a problem? Take any car, and drive it on a track.
That's not the same abuse as a track.
For 24 hours, I'll tell you, after 2 hours, every car is on fire.
I was going to say, after 2 laps, you're like, what? Where are my brakes?
Where are my brakes?
Yeah.
Whatever happened to my gearbox? I mean, where is this smoke coming from my
Why was everything
from my
so
hood?
spongy? Yeah.
So simply amazing testing ground for any car maker is to go and take your car to Le Mans, because it's so difficult.
It's grueling.
It's grueling. But we make better cars because of it.
The C8 was the one that you used.
Yeah. First the Double 12, then we raced with the Spider for 2 years, and then we basically, the final race cars were the La Violettes, like you have.
Right. Wow.
That's awesome.
We learned a lot.
Pretty wild.
We learned a lot, but we thought we could learn more if we bought a Formula One team. That was definitely not true, but it was a nice try. That was the most expensive experience. I'd do it again.
But I mean, that's why a lot of these companies are producing cars, so that they can have a presence in F1.
That's right. And we should have, and we did. So Spyker F1 started life in 2006, when we ran the 2007 season. and then we lost a shirt, and we sold out to Vijay Mallya, and now it's Force India, and they do very well. I mean, podium last week, very, very well done. I mean, these guys basically took the team and improved it massively, and they're a very, very fierce contender now for podium places. So it's possible, but that's, I mean, we sold in 2007, so 8 years later.
8 years, yeah.
And I don't know how many trillions further.
Of dollars.
Yeah.
Well, Rome wasn't built in a day, so.
Damn right. And I think that they've done an amazing job. So we were in Formula One for one single year. And that was it.
Still not a bad thing to be.
Please, how many car manufacturers are there that are not in Formula One?
More than that there are.
Absolutely.
That's a
Absolutely.
given.
It's a tremendous honor. It's a
I'll
presence.
never forget, we went to the first race of 2007, which was in Australia, Melbourne. And, well, of course, we were novices, so we were walking around the track. I ran into Ron Dennis and Bernie Ecclestone. And Ecclestone introduced us to Ron Dennis, and he said, so these are the guys from Spyker. This is their first race here with the season. And then Ron Dennis said, welcome to the snake pit. Well, he wasn't kidding. That I can tell you. It was a snake pit. Everything you hear about Formula One is true, and it's much worse than that, actually. But it is an addiction. It is sensational.
And it's world class.
It's world class. Well, it's in very difficult times now, for many reasons. But I'm sure it will survive. It's been around for so long, and
It's tremendous outside of the United States.
yeah,
Oh,
and that's
colossal.
That's sad because this country
It's
is
sad for the United States.
it's sad for manufacturers because for most of the manufacturers, for us definitely, United States would be our number one market. You would love people to come and see Spykers on the Formula One track, right?
Absolutely.
But unfortunately, there is very little enthusiasm for Formula One in the United States. And that should change. I don't think it's easy to change it. I mean, this country is so ingrained with
I think it has-
NASCAR.
NASCAR, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
But
a
I
NASCAR country.
think things are changing. And
Well, you know,
largely
in
because of
the
social
big cities,
media.
but that's in the
and-
big cities. You have to remember that there's not that many big cities in the U.S. as comparison to the country. Like the most popular music in the United States is country music.
Absolutely. And the Ford
Just like NASCAR.
F-150 is the highest sold vehicle.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Well, that tells you a lot, right?
it doesn't mean things don't change.
No, I'm not
It
saying
will
that
change.
it can't
It
change.
depends
It
on
will.
marketing and the internet and social interaction, I think.
Well, there's that, and there's a whole new trend of young people don't want to buy a car. Period.
That's
right?
true also.
And that is going to be a problem in not many years from now. So I think we're looking at a revolution in the car industry, which is going to shake everything up big time. But that's a whole different discussion.
Yeah.
But I think fast cars will still be fast cars.
Well, I
You'll
think
still be the cool guy. You'll
when
still
Ye-
be...
yes and no, because with the autonomous cars that they're talking about for the future, that's going to really plague us enthusiasts greatly with self-driving vehicles.
Well, I don't
gonna
think
slow
it's
down
going to be.
traffic.
Well,
I think there's
I'm
still
sure.
going to be that niche market.
Oh,
Yes,
there's
I
always
agree
going,
with you.
There's always going to be. So let's fast forward a little bit. So we'll get past the race team, and we'll touch on a subject which I'm sure is not the best subject in the world, but people want to know and educate themselves with the whole Saab acquisition and the speed bump that Spyker hit.
That was more than a speed bump.
All right, I was trying to be
It
gentle.
was a wall.
I was being gentle. So the Great Wall of Saab, in case anybody doesn't know that's listening, but it was big news, that at the time GM was selling Saab.
Well, GM was actually unloading a lot of brands. They were getting rid of a lot of brands like Hummer.
Well, they were hurting beyond belief. They're the
Yeah.
ones that in 2008 took the biggest chunk from the United States government
Yeah.
to survive.
And they had to, in order to be eligible for all of that, they had to show that they were actually reducing capacity.
And willing to, yeah.
And so they started putting Saab into liquidation. But at the time, I made an effort to buy the company, and it's a long story, but in the end, I succeeded to get Saab from GM. But they were already in voluntary liquidation. And if we have misjudged, if you will, one thing, we misjudged the effects that being in voluntary liquidation had on the customer base, but particularly on the dealer and distribution network. They were shocked by the fact that happened. So we managed to undo that and get Saab out of voluntary liquidation. But to get the company back on track took us more time than we had anticipated, and we sold like 32,000 cars in 2010.
I think people were just shocked with who the heck is Spyker that they just bought Saab.
Well, that may have contributed, but generally,
I'm saying just such a small niche, brand.
Well, you have to
Saab.
put these things into perspective, right? What was the situation in 2009? The car industry was on fire. I mean, everything was collapsing. Every car maker was confronted with his unions, with layoffs, with 40% sales declines, with a market that was stagnating beyond your wildest imagination. Governments had to step up to the plate
to bail out
and bail the car industry out, or it was collapsing. Now, there's a simple rule in the car industry: 1 in 10. Every person working in a car company basically provides, directly and indirectly, business for 10 others. So if a car company like Volkswagen right now, with 670,000 employees in Germany, would go out of business, that would basically
collapse the economy. Yeah.
Well, it's much worse than that, in the sense that if Volkswagen goes out, and it's just a theoretical example, but if GM would have gone out at the time, it would have probably taken Ford and Chrysler with it, because the suppliers would go down. And the suppliers can't survive on Ford and Chrysler alone. So if GM would have gone down, they would have probably taken the entire supplier industry down. You know how many employees that is on the street? It would have been a disaster of gigantic.
It would have been magnanimous.
And I think that the American government at the time took the absolute right decision by trying to stem those disasters by keeping the companies afloat. And they have reorganized themselves. And GM did reorganize itself and sold off a number of activities, including Saab. And we picked it up for next to nothing. And we had a very hard time putting the company back on track. And then when we needed funds to do so, we ran into a wall where General Motors wouldn't allow certain investors to come on board, Chinese investors. Yeah. And that became an issue to the point that we couldn't survive.
Well, that's the market now, China.
It was, well, that's the problem. It was, and for GM, China is the single largest market. And they really didn't want Saab to become a serious player in the Chinese market with very strong Chinese partners. So that was the end of that.
So where is Saab today?
Saab's assets were purchased by a company called National Electric Vehicle Sweden. Guess where they're from? China.
Yeah.
And you got it right. And they started production of the old Saab 9-3 for about 5-6 months. Made a very small number of them, then ran out of money, stopped production, and have been in difficulty ever since. And I really hope that they're coming out of it, because they wanted to develop an all-electric Saab.
Okay.
And now allegedly they're going to go back into China and build a new factory, build electric cars for China. But the problem is that the trademarks that we owned were shared with Saab AB, the defense technology company that also made the jets. And Saab AB simply prohibited NEVs from continuing to use the Saab trademark. So even if they would be able to put the cars back into production, they couldn't be called Saabs. The company wasn't even called Saab. The company was called NEVs. The cars were called Saab. Oh. So, but that's, I think, a foregone situation. There will not be new Saabs on the road anytime.
What happened to all the leftover Saabs?
Well, there weren't that many leftover Saabs, and the ones that were left over were sold pretty quickly through the networks at tremendous discounts, of course, because everybody thought there's never going to be any service.
Right, there's not going to be any parts available.
No,
right.
that was absolutely untrue, because the parts business was very profitable and independent. It was spun off. The government basically owned it, Swedish government. And it's still supplying parts for all the Saabs in the world. There was like a 1.3 million euro Saabs in circulation. Yeah. And to the best of my knowledge, they still get their parts.
Interesting. Okay, so that was the Saab story.
That was a Saab story.
So that was a rough one.
Speaking of Busta Rhymes, that was his first song. The first song to ever make it big for him was when he was with Leaders of the New School, which was his group before he went solo. and the song that put him on the map is Sob Story, and it's about his sob.
No.
How crazy is that?
I didn't know that.
Wait till you have this
And
conversation
this
with
is
him.
relevant because Busta Rhymes was a
He was one
Spyker
of my
owner.
early customers. Wonderful guy. Wonderful
Yeah, no,
guy.
he's super cool.
Yeah.
Wait till you have this story when you're going to be like, yo, I was talking to this dude Tminus. He's going to be like, what? Who the hell is a Tminus? And then you're going to tell him, and he's going to be like, that dude knows hip-hop.
There we go.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So then we'll fast forward a little more, and we'll keep going with the chronological order. So after Saab, what happened with Spyker?
Well, we had a lot of what we call legacy debt, dating from the Formula One days, and dating also from the acquisition of Saab. So basically, after Saab went down in December of 2011, Spyker was left for dead along the roadside, and everybody thought this company is going to go down. But I wasn't ready to let my darling baby company go to pieces. So I decided that I would put all my efforts on resurrecting the company, and we did. So we brought on board a shareholder who was one of our potential partners in the Saab deal, Chinese manufacturer of, well, actually the number one bus manufacturer in the world, but they also had a car division. And they took a stake in the company, and it allowed us to introduce the new small entry-level car, the B6 Venator, which we showed at the 2013 Geneva Salon. And the response was unbelievable.
Beautiful car, by the way. I fell in love with it when I first saw it. T-minus. I don't know if you actually saw it, but
I have not seen it.
it was. It's based on a Lotus chassis, or is it?
Yeah, we will definitely use Lotus gear for that.
And by Lotus, we mean Elise?
By Lotus, we mean Evora.
Evora.
Oh, Evora.
Yeah.
Cool.
Because Lotus has been a very long time partner of Spyker. They
didn't know
were
that.
instrumental in getting us into the United States with
Wow.
all their engineering capabilities. They helped us getting the fuel systems. To get your fuel systems US certified is just crazy. And they helped us tremendously with that. And we've always been drawing a lot of services from Lotus. So the relationship has been invariably very good. And when we looked for a partner for the smaller Venator, Lotus was a very logical port of call. But unfortunately, the Chinese didn't live up to their expectations and their commitments, and having funded, part of their investment, they basically vanished. This is not an unusual story, not just in the car industry, but everywhere else. And so we were basically left on our own, and that caused us a lot of trouble. So by the end of 2014, we were in a situation that we just couldn't make ends meet. So we chose to go into Chapter 11 because we had agreed funding, and but we had to protect ourselves against our creditors in order to make it to the moment of funding. But the funding still didn't come in quick enough. So by the middle of December of 2014, the court-appointed administrator, basically applied for the company's bankruptcy, and we were declared bankrupt. So after 15 years of working my tail off, all of a sudden I was confronted with a company in bankruptcy, Chapter 7. And that really, really was something I wouldn't accept. So,
And this is when all the Spyker owners took a deep breath and said, "Fuck."
are you okay to say that on radio?
We can say whatever you want.
No kidding. All
Yeah,
right, I've
there's
been
no
holding back all
censorship
this
here.
time.
Don't hold back.
There's
holding back.
There's no censorship.
Oh, God, I love it.
Say whatever the fuck you want.
Let's talk
Let
about
it all
your
out.
BDSM lifestyle.
T-minus is an awkward guy. I think I can say that. That's not
Anyway, so
weird.
all Spyker owners kind of said, what the hell's going on here? And then, you fought a great fight. You've been fighting for some time now.
That's probably my DNA. I don't know.
It's been a bit of a boxing match going back and forth.
Yeah, but I did appeal the court ruling where we were declared bankrupt, and I won, which is, I can assure you, very, very unusual.
Congratulations.
It seemed a rarity to win.
It doesn't happen. So strangely enough, as being a lawyer, I know how to do these things. Sometimes it can be very advantageous to be a lawyer. And so, having won the court case, the company was put back into the previous position. So you've never been bankrupt. You go back to Chapter 11. But that means that everything that happened whilst you were in Chapter 7, let's say these 5 weeks that you were in Chapter 7, basically is undone. So all the employees, for instance, were fired by the trustee whilst we were in bankruptcy, and then we were back in Chapter 11, and they were all on the payroll again. Anyway, it was a legal mess.
Kind of a time machine.
Yeah, it's like a time machine, but that's the way it works. So, 'cause legally speaking, Spyker was never bankrupt. So then we had to go through the process of making an arrangement with creditors, which under Dutch law it's very simple. If you make a deal with more than 50% of your creditors, representing more than 50% of the outstanding debt, it becomes a compulsory creditor agreement. Everybody has to agree with it. We had one creditor that really wanted to make our life very difficult, so we had to fight him all the way, won every single lawsuit that he filed and we filed. And then by the 29th of July of this year, finally, we got out of Chapter 11, clean as a whistle, debt-free, absolutely better position than we'd been in a long time.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So all the Spyker owners then said, hell yeah, they're back.
Then they were like, I love Victor.
Yeah, well, that is a different, nobody said that, but they said, we're so glad that Spyker's
But
back.
I would say that Spyker owners definitely show a different support for the brand versus other manufacturers. I mean, I think there's a certain relationship that Spyker has built with their customers, where I remember we had spoken once before, and customer number 208 is on the phone, or customer 206 needs a part.
That's sick.
Where your serial number is associated with the actual, end
So it's like
user.
you're in jail. That's cool.
Pretty much. But
I mean, when has he had his head examined for the last time? I don't know.
he's just, listen, there's no
He's
explanation.
Tminus.
Yeah, there's no explanation.
No, he's just.
But there's definitely a difference in ownership with a Spyker. At least I know I can speak for myself. I went through some hell with my car, plain and simple. I had bought my car in 2012. The car was a 2010 that had been in dealership for some time, and it had sat
Jay
for a
Leno
bit.
drove it. That helped.
Yes, Jay Leno. Yeah, that definitely helped it. He's actually a friend of a friend who's supposed to sign my window sticker. But anyway.
You're so cool. Can I say hi to you in public?
No. So I had the car for a little bit of time, and the car gave me some problems. And I tell you, even through all the troubles that Spyker was going through, you and your staff never faltered from trying to help and trying to get the car fixed. It just never seemed to all come together. So at one point, they actually you all decided to take my car back to Holland.
Yeah.
And
at our expense.
Yeah, and how many manufacturers would actually step up and do that? Most of them would just, say, oh, it's a lemon, we'll give you another car, or we'll do this, or we'll do that. But they actually took my car, boxed it up, shipped it back to Holland. It spent, I think, about 3 months there.
Yeah.
And they actually tore down the car down to its bare bones and rebuilt the car from scratch.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the commitment you make as a manufacturer. You want a happy customer, because there's nothing. You'd rather have no customer than an unhappy customer. Trust me.
Oh yeah.
And you were.
People will go out of their way to talk shit about you, versus
and actually,
complimenting.
and if you're a small car manufacturer like us, word of mouth is more important than anything else for your brand reputation. So the last thing you want is an unhappy customer. So you go out of your way to get and this has nothing to do with lemon laws, and this is just the honor of the company that you want your customer to get his money's worth.
I think that says a lot for your company.
Well, it's normal, right? I mean, we do have
Not
a
in this
personal
country, it's not
relationship.
normal.
Well, it should be. We have a relationship with every owner, right? We know where every car is, we know where every owner is, and we know how to get in touch with them, and they know how to get in touch with us. And that's wonderful, right? And that goes for Pagani, that goes for Koenigsegg. I think McLaren has become a little bit too big for that, and sure as hell doesn't work for the Porsches, Ferraris,
Right.
Maseratis of this world,
It's a
right?
small segment of the bespoke cars and those owners, and I love the experience. It's been a great experience. Even though I didn't have the car for 3 months, and I bought a Porsche 996 just to get me by.
Yeah,
just
poor
so I
man.
had something to drive.
I mean, how sad is that you have
he
to
does
resort?
he does some charity work.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
charity.
No,
It's charity.
he's a good guy.
Yeah, and then I got the car back, and the car's been fantastic ever since. I've no complaints.
It's inherently a good car. There were some flaws in your cars. We fixed them, and now it's done.
I
And
mean,
now you won't have any trouble.
No, and I haven't.
Because they're bulletproof.
I've driven it, thousands of miles, and with
And
no
you,
problems.
and you love it.
Love
I
it
see
to
the smile
death.
on your face when you pass me by.
Absolutely, yes, I did. I did pass you.
I got a cool question that I was just thinking of when you said Venator. Where do the names for the cars come from?
Well, interestingly, all the names are basically either related to the carriage or the coach building heritage of the company or aviation. So a Spider is an open two-seater coach. That's where the Spider name comes from. La Violette was a 21-year-old Belgian engineer that developed the fantastic engines that Spyker used in the 1907 era. Aileron is a flap on a wing
Oh, cool.
of an aircraft. Venator is the Latin word for hunter, jager in Dutch. And that's exactly the name of the planes that Spyker made. They were jagers, hunters. So
I love
since the logo says Nulla, Tenaci, Invia is Via, which is Latin for the tenacious, no road is impassible, we decided that the name...
That's gangster.
You didn't know that?
I need that in my life. Yeah.
Well, you just live it, and it becomes part of your life. We've never given up, right? You just don't give up, because if you do, you're done. So
Absolutely.
you have to keep on pushing, and that's why Spyker is still around. So the name of the Venator means hunter in Latin, and it's a direct connection with the planes that Spyker made.
Super cool.
So hopefully it'll be in production next year, and on my rally, the Hunt will have the Hunter.
There you
Wow,
go.
the
The hunter drives the hunter.
So do you have orders currently for Venators?
We have plenty of orders for Venator. We just have to put the car into production now, and so we're
So
finalizing.
So where, before we go into that, what is Spyker doing today?
Spyker today is doing a number of things. First of all, we have, of course, had some time to lick our wounds after coming out of Chapter 11, right? Secondly, all of the activities that I had employed to generate the cash to continue have now been successfully concluded, and we're finalizing the transactions where fresh cash, large sums of fresh cash come into the company. And in that context, we're now doing something we should have done before, and that is we go and move the production back to the UK, where we were. All the cars were originally built in Coventry, and that's exactly what we're doing. So November 1, we move the entire production back to the UK.
Will
We
it still be
keep-
considered a Dutch car?
Do I care?
I don't know. Do you?
No.
Okay.
The headquarters will still be in Holland. I've never heard a client say, I won't buy your car because it wasn't made in Holland. UK is actually, for us and for you as a customer, a much better place to build a car. Okay. Not because our Dutch employees are not good, because they're fantastic, but if you build a car in Coventry, you're in the epicenter of everything that has to do with the cottage industry of the car manufacturing world. You can get anything you want within a 20-mile radius. So for us, it is so much easier to be building cars there than in Holland. In Holland, we have to basically import everything because there's nothing there. And that is different in the UK. So particularly because we're going to use a lot of components from Lotus for the Venator. They're just a few hours down the road.
Makes sense.
So there are many, many considerations, but all of them basically point to one direction, and that is move the factory back to where it came from. And the only reason we came back to the Netherlands, because we left Holland in 2009 with the factory, but the only reason we came back, because after the Saab debacle, on top of that, adding insult to injury, the manufacturer of our cars in Coventry went bust.
Gotcha.
Unrelated, but they went bust. So in order to save whatever we had, we moved everything back to the factory and continued producing cars there. But now that we're at this new juncture, it's really a no-brainer. We're moving the production back to UK, keeping a small outfit, sales, marketing, headquarters, distribution.
I'm psyched.
Yeah, in Holland. So that's what's happening. So we're resuming the production of the aileron in the UK.
Okay.
So the last 5 of the what we call aileron 1, the car that has been produced for a few years now, will be made in the UK, and then we start with aileron 2, and that's so basically a very heavy facelift, right? We'll make 50 of those, and in the meantime we start the Venator. But much more interesting than that, I think,
Is the Venator going to be a larger scale produced car?
Yes, definitely. We think that we can sell 500 of them a year. at price points starting from 150 for a coupe to 175 for a Spider. 400 horsepower.
Which that's a really good segment to be in right now.
I think it is.
I think it is too, because I was just discussing the other day, because somebody said to me, would you ever sell your Spyker? And I said, well, I would never want to, but of course, money talks. I said, but where would I go from here? Where do you go? And, the problem is everything is either, there's a big segment of the $200,000 to $300,000 range. But north of 300, there is, there's only a few cars, and then you go to the uber exotics. Yeah. But below the 200 mark, in between 100 and 200, there's not that many choices as far as exotic cars. No. And Spyker is an exotic car versus a Porsche is not exotic, no. in my opinion. A 918, that's on the exotic market. It's an uber supercar. Yeah. It's a little different. But as far as an exotic, there's not that much out there. I think McLaren made the right move with the 570. Yeah, I think
they will do very well with it.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's a great price point, as is the Venator, if it's going to hit that mark.
Absolutely, and it will hit that mark.
And if the performance numbers are there, I think it'll be
people don't buy a Spyker because they want the fastest car.
No, not at all.
They want to travel in style, sure. And they want to have a car that
stands out. It separates themselves.
They'll never find another one at the traffic light. And
that's what I love about mine the most.
Oh, you have the only white one, the only white La Villette in the world.
It's a conversation piece. Otherwise, just being the Spyker itself, it's a conversation piece. I had plenty of Ferraris and Lamborghinis and Porsches, and there's nothing uber special about them. And even if you bought a pre-owned Spyker for $150,000 versus another car for $150,000, the Spyker is always a conversation piece.
I tend to agree with you.
By the way, floor-mounted pedals. You're the man.
Yeah, floor-mounted. Yeah,
floor-mounted pedals are great unless you do like 1,000 miles. Because I just did about 2 weekends ago when we were on my rally.
You should just man up, Seth.
And my heel was killing me after a while. So they will do that to you, but it's not built for ultra comfort. The car, it's built for the driving experience.
Exactly right. Race cars have floor-mounted pedals.
Yes.
Yes, they do.
And center locking hubs and.
Hell yeah.
All sorts of
all you need is air jacks and it's a wrap.
There you go. So what else are we doing? That was your question. We're merging the company with an electric aviation company, electric aircraft manufacturer from Portland, Oregon, Volta Volare, a wonderful little outfit owned by a dear friend, Paul Peterson. And why are we merging with them? Not only is it the logical thing to do for Spyker, having been an aircraft manufacturer in the previous century, but also this company has amazing technology at its disposal. If it's good enough for the air, trust me, it's good enough for the road.
I was going to say, if you could trust it in the air. Are they going to be adopting the name Spyker?
Absolutely.
Oh,
so the planes,
awesome.
the planes will be Spyker V5s.
Oh wow!
The last plane Spyker made was V4, so the new plane will be V5. It's an all carbon, lightweight, 4-seater with an electric propulsion, and you'll see that coming anytime soon. So, but that technology will also find its way in our cars, and it really, in my view, makes no sense to start making electric sports cars. At least I wouldn't buy one, and I've always looked at Spyker. Would I buy it? I started the company because I was my first client, right? I was the typical buyer of Astons and Ferraris. I never had a Lamborghini in my life. I was just a typical Aston and Ferrari buyer, and I loved the performance of the Ferraris, and I loved the style and the classy appearance of the Aston Martin. Yeah. So what I did was I basically took both of them. I took the mid-engine concept of the Modena, which I was driving at the time, and I combined it with the Vanquish I was driving at the time. Beautiful classic design with a incredible performance. That's really what it is, a crossover. It's the car I couldn't buy. I couldn't buy a mid-engine Aston, and I couldn't buy an ultra-classic Ferrari.
So you took the best of both worlds?
It's kind of like Ferruccio's story with Ferrari. He wasn't happy with the product.
And he couldn't get what he wanted. Right. I couldn't get what I wanted.
Same as Pagani, right?
If you can't get what you want, you can either be sitting at home moaning and groaning and feeling sad for yourself, or you can just be as crazy as I am and
go
build your own, right? The jury's out whether that was a really wise decision or not. But anyway, the cars that we made they're basically a crossover of that. Add to that the wonderful heritage of racing and aviation, and that's what the Spyker is, right? So what are we doing? We're going to make planes, we're going to make the cars, but we're going to make internal combustion engine cars, the ones that we've made so far, and electric cars. But we're not going to make electric sports cars because I don't think that there is a market for them. I really don't think so. Or the market is going to be so small that it's just not going to be worth your while. But what is very interesting is the market for SUVs. Tesla clearly showed the way by going for the Model S, and just now the Model X. I probably would have done it the other way around. I think I would have started with the Model X, but surely we will start with our SUV. We launched the Peking to Paris, as it's called.
Love that.
In 2006. We were way ahead of our time with a super sport utility vehicle. Because of all the funding issues we had over time, we never managed to put that car into production. But
there is one, right?
There are actually two, and there's one driving what we call Mule. It's the fastest Land Rover Defender in the world because it's a Spyker platform with a Defender body on it. It's a very cool car. 600 horsepower. We call it a Mule.
How do I Google it?
You can't find a Mule. You'll never find that.
I drove that one.
You drove the Mule.
Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's an amazing car. 4-wheel drive, aluminium chassis, fantastic car, 24-inch rims. Anyway, that car we're going to produce as an electric car. So we've completely redesigned it, and that's going to be our first electric car. With, I think, disruptive technology, both in terms of motors, electric motors, and energy storage systems. I'm not a believer in lithium ion in any way, shape, or form. I think it's just simply an inadequate type of energy storage.
What's adequate?
What's adequate is something that doesn't deteriorate over time. I mean, look at your mobile phone, right? Mm-hmm. After 5 years or 3 years, you can basically not use your phone anymore because lithium ion has a memory, so to speak. Every cycle, every charge-discharge cycle, your battery will have less storage than the previous cycle. And that's terrible, right? Your range will go smaller, smaller, smaller. Think of the weight of lithium ion. 1,300 pounds of batteries in a Tesla. Empty or full, right? Self-defeating, you would say. Think of the price of lithium ion. So expensive. I mean, wonderful idea to create a gigafactory and drive the price down. But still, it's exceptionally expensive. Then there is the fact that lithium ion has a very hard time getting charged because the material is so dense that electrons travel very slowly through it. You can add graphene, you can do nanotechnology, you can do a lot of things to improve the charging time of lithium ion, but it's still going to be quite long. So we're going to do something totally different. We're not going to use lithium ion in any way, shape, or form. We'll make announcements in due course about how we're going to...
Is it going to be revolutionary?
We think so. We think so, yeah. But surely we're not going to use lithium ion because I think there is no future for that product. I'm probably the only one that thinks so, but that's really what my view is.
So when does the partnership take place? Is it something that's already taken place, or is it?
Well, we're crossing the T's and dotting the I's now.
And then you're moving to Coventry.
Yeah, we're moving into Coventry. We're merging with Volta Volare. We will set up our base for anything and everything electric in Portland, Oregon, where Volta Volare is based. And so we will have small headquarters in Holland, production in the UK of anything internal combustion engine, and everything else electric in North America.
Will the Venator be available for the US market?
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And are you staying Audi motor?
Well, no. The Venator will not have an Audi motor.
What will it have?
A Lotus motor.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. And the aileron will be, you're going to cease making that one?
Well, we will make another 50.
Number 2, I think you said?
Yeah, they will have supercharged Audi engines. And after that, there will be a wholly new car. And that will be, well, we'll talk about that in due course. But I assure you that's going to be what we call our Halo car.
Will that be available stateside?
I mean, if you make Spykers and they're not available stateside, you don't want to live, right? This is the market. Period. If I could make cars only for America and not for the rest of the world, I would do that.
Because I am looking forward to adding another one to my fleet.
Well, there you go. Do I hear an order? Yeah.
One day, as soon as I see it, we'll see what happens. But I
Yeah.
mean, I would take one of the Peking to Paris.
Yeah, I would tell you.
How do you know about that, and how come I don't know about it? How come you didn't tell me?
It was
What kind of
unveiled.
friend are you,
It was
Seth?
unveiled in Geneva, right?
Yeah, 2006.
Yeah, it was unveiled, and it was just absolutely stunning.
It's got to be uncool.
I mean, the interior work, the skeletal frames of the seats and
Yeah.
everything, it was absolutely spectacular.
Yeah, it's
And,
big fun. I had so much fun designing that car.
It's awesome. It's awesome. I really wanted one.
Yeah, well, you just have to wait a little longer, and we'll get you one.
Have
There you go.
seen it?
Oh,
Take a look.
I found
You see how the wonders of the
my
internet.
stalking skills are crazy. Oh yeah, this is sick.
So that brings us up to date with Spyker. That's what's going on.
Hot.
Just real quick, out of all of the cars that you own, because I don't know what exactly is in your collection, but what is your favorite?
Oh, this is such a difficult question, Seth. This is asking
Well, how many
a
vehicles do
father
you
of
have?
6, which is your what is your favorite child?
No, that's impossible.
I
You
would
can't-
say it's impossible, but my favorite Spyker or my favorite car?
I was going to say, let's make it easy.
How many cars are in your collection?
Well, there used to be 50, now there are 15.
Okay.
The crisis did hit me hard.
Oh,
I had the company to keep afloat. So
True.
I sold lots of them. But if I had to take a pick of my favorite car that I ever owned, I owned the 1954 Ferrari 250 Mille. Well, it was actually called 250 Monza with a Scaglietti body and a Lampredi 3-liter V12. It was the sexiest thing I've ever driven.
Wow.
do you still have it?
I wish.
Oh.
No. It had to go in order to keep the company afloat. And that was, in hindsight, it would have been much better to let the company go and keep the bloody Ferrari, because I would have retired on it. But no, that's what you do when you are an entrepreneur, right? You have to make
Absolutely.
hard choices.
Oh, don't
I
I
cut
know.
the Ferrari loose.
That's it, man. I think you made the right decision.
So how many Spykers do you have personally?
3.
3, which is a C8 Spider.
A C8 Spider and a C8 La Violette and a C8 Aileron.
Gotcha. Now, what was the real quick? Was there a Zagato?
We made one Zagato, a C12 Zagato. We had a deal with Volkswagen back in 2007. I made a contract with Mr. Pichetsrieder, who was at the time the CEO, to get their W12 engine, and it was the same engine that was actually going to propel the D12 Peking to Paris. And I knew Andrea Zagato very well from the classic car scene, and he's a wonderful guy. And I always wanted to make a Zagato car together with him, and so we did. And this was in our Formula One days, so we took all of the Formula One cues that you could think of and put them into design. And the car is still in the factory. It's pretty beautiful and also quite extravagant. And hopefully, out of the 50 ailerons that we're still going to make, we've assumed that we'll make 12 Zagatos.
Really? Are any of these cars for sale?
No.
So disappointing.
It's all right. Victor Muller's my homie. We got this.
All right. Well, on that note, I think
On
we're
this
going to get
bombshell.
this wrapped up. We're going to get this wrapped up. I don't know what else to say. I mean, this was a tour of the Spyker history. We greatly appreciate your time. Our listeners will definitely enjoy hearing the history and what's going on today.
I think they'll all be asleep by now. It's
No,
been so
definitely
long.
not. No, I don't think so.
I love to hear the controversy that comes out of my mouth.
Yeah. So you kept them going, right?
He usually does. He usually
Thanks to
actually,
Tminus, everybody's still wide awake.
He's usually usually calling me broke half the time, and
No. Seth's entire vocabulary consists of "I'm broke."
well, I am.
Why don't you tell him your monthly bill?
I own a Spyker, so
Tell
therefore
me your
I'm
monthly
broke.
bill.
So it's very low. It's very low.
His
It's
monthly
very
bill?
low.
Tell him.
So, but thank you again for taking us through the tour of Spyker to see what's going on yesterday and today. We appreciate your time. I know that your time is valuable. You're not here for that long, and then you're heading back. And I guess you're counting down the days. You got a big move ahead of you.
Yeah, well, I really don't have to push the cars into the truck myself. So I have fantastic people that are taking care of it.
Good.
And I have very little to worry about there. I have always been blessed, I have to say, with not only very committed clients, but also very committed employees.
You know what that is?
And
That's
partners.
karma.
And partners. We've just been so blessed. So that's good.
Yeah,
really
so
good.
we look forward to a lot of upcoming events and news with Spyker, and hopefully it flourishes, which it sounds like you're on the right track. that you've resolved a lot of the mishaps from the past, and you're moving forward. And I think that's about it. Do you have anything to add, Tminus?
No, I was blown away by this interview. To tell you the truth, I feel greatly educated now on it, and it's a fantastic story, and it's really a remarkable timeline of events that has put you to where you are now, and I'm very impressed.
It's a great story of survival. I mean, I'm not going to.
Yeah, but that has to stop, right? I mean, it's true. It's a great story of survival, but there is a time that you just have to say enough of this and just build cars and shut up, because we've made our life very difficult. And I'm only reproaching myself for that. I mean, nobody forced me to buy into a Formula One team. Nobody put a gun to my head to buy Saab.
But those are all experiences that are going to add to this company as a whole in the future.
Sure, but I think
you could have done without it.
I could have done. In hindsight, you could have done without it. And I'm definitely not going to do anything as brass as buying into Saab again, because it has provided so much distraction. It almost costed Spyker, my dear baby, its life, and that's really not worth it. So my full focus will be on Spyker, building up that company, and not going to go into any distractions. I mean, maybe you think making airplanes is a distraction, but it surely isn't, because there is so much overlap in the technology that it's going to be instrumental for where Spyker wants to be. And so that's not a distraction. That's something that enhances the overall business.
Well, I'm getting my pilot's license.
There you go.
So
there you go. No, it's really, that is a very good development. There's really lots to be gained there. But getting into Formula One team, of course, was a bit wild in hindsight. In hindsight.
Yeah.
At the time, we had a fully funded program, right? But it turned out to be very different. In hindsight, we had a fully funded Saab business plan, fully funded. But things turned out to be a little bit different than we had anticipated. And then we were just not allowed to make the required changes.
Yeah, but your hands were tied.
Hands were tied.
Yeah.
What comes to show is that where a company had been tied with a number of umbilicals to the mothership, GM, for so long, cutting those ties required so much. Saab couldn't breathe by itself without GM. So we surgically had to cut every single umbilical and make Saab stand on its own feet. After so many years, that was very difficult, very difficult. Well, we got it done, but then, of course, disaster struck. We have no one to blame but ourselves, right? Nobody forced us to buy that company. It was involuntary liquidation. General Motors would just put it to bed, and it would have just slowly died away, and that would have been it. But I loved that company.
It's a learning experience.
Yeah.
That's
well,
it.
It's a costly one.
Well, it was a costly one, but there are a few truths to be said about it, right? I mean, when we were in the middle of this, one of my board members, who actually lives here in New York, he told me, think of what Churchill said about a situation like this. When you're going through hell, keep going. And that's just what we did. And the other truth of, if it doesn't destroy you, it makes you stronger, is so true. It's so true. If you have really actually looked into the abyss, and you're dead. I mean, we've had the closest near-death experience a company can have. We were bankrupt, and we managed, we were dead, and then we reanimated ourselves, and we got back into the living. That's about as close as you can get. But it also means that you will try to stay away from that with everything you've got for the rest of your life, because I can assure you one thing, it wasn't fun. And the wonderful thing about Spyker is it's so much fun. Look at the events that we've done.
Yeah.
Going to Le Mans, being at Pebble Beach, we've
Monaco, you've been there.
We've been driving our cars on the Formula One track during Monaco race days for way over a decade. So much fun, right? And creating business in the process. But Formula One was a bridge too far. Saab, in as much as it was a fantastic deal on paper, it just didn't work out. I'm not going to take any such risk with the company again. I'm just too old for that shit.
And that's a wrap. So, Tminus, you want to say a couple of words?
Victor, thank you so much for your time, and Spyker. Riker.
Right.
For
Right.
all your hospitality.
Right.
and-
Rike's been a little quiet because he kind of lost his voice this weekend, but we appreciate your hospitality and having us
Absolutely.
here in New York City to record this podcast. So what we usually do is we usually go around the room and everybody gives themselves a plug if they want to, as far as any type of social media. So, Tminus?
You can find me at TMINUS_CarLifestyle on Instagram. Also follow CarLifestyle. And
Which CarLifestyle, as of today, is up to
2.95 million followers.
You can find me at Exotics Rally, Art of Rap NY, and you can find the podcast listed for free at the Car Lifestyle Podcast. And if I may say so, because Victor is not a big participator in social media, but his staff is, you can find them at SpykerCars.com. .com, and also Spyker Cars on Instagram. And also
and then,
the
of course,
forum.
There's the Spyker Owner forum.
Right, which is SpykerOwner.com.
SpykerOwner.com. And you can follow my personal Spyker on Spyker number 207 with a hashtag 207.
Excellent.
Cool.
And I think that's a wrap. So thank you again, Victor, for spending some time with us. We thoroughly enjoyed, and I guess that's a wrap.
Car Lifestyle.